comment, or are we more or less interested in just making sure we get a chance to hear from everybody and possibly shortening that up? I don't see a huge number of people on the call, but the meeting has just begun. But just by way of just a quick pre-meeting, do you want to stick to the 3 minutes, or would you consider shortening that if we get a lot of people that want to make comment, maybe 2 minutes? Want to see how it goes? I think it'd be better to establish it up front. Councilmember Cumbie, just real quick.
Yeah. I think since our standard has been 3 minutes, if we were going to reduce it to 2, we should have announced that in advance, because people may have prepared a statement planning on 3 minutes.
I see. And I see folks nodding in agreement. I will say this: it's certainly not a breach of procedure for the council to ask people to keep it briefer than that. And those of you that have been around know that, even though we do have the typical standard of 3 minutes. But we will let it go. But I wouldn't want anybody to be under the impression that that's not a change that we have occasionally, as the council, imposed despite the tradition of 3 minutes. Vice Mayor Pierce?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think based on the similarity of the emails, I think reminding folks not to repeat would be a good idea.
Vice Mayor, I completely agree, and that's part of why I'm asking this question now, is I'm not sure we need to hear the same statement from groups, regardless of whether or not they're communicating support or opposition. I'm not sure how many times the council needs to hear the same statement over and over again, but we will see how it goes. It sounds like more or less a majority of the council is interested in allowing people to make whatever statement they'd like for as long as they'd like, under 3 minutes, as often as they want. So we will do that. Councilmember Cumbie?
We could encourage them to be as brief as they can. And like Councilwoman Pierce said, you know, to ask them not to repeat the same thing over and over.
We certainly could. You're right. The Vice Mayor did mention that. Here's what I think. Why don't we just kind of see how it goes, and then we will, if it's needed, then we'll ask people maybe just to express to the council support or opposition one way or another through other speakers possibly, which is also something we've done before. Vice Mayor Pierce, do you want a minute to take care of that sun glare situation before I do the call to order and the roll call? No? Okay. All right. I'm going to call this meeting of the City Council to order. It's approximately 5 minutes after 6, March 30th, 2021, and ask for a roll call of members.
Cumbie.
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
Harrington.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Schuster.
Here.
Sorry,
Here.
Schuster? Oh, I have your chambers muted. Hold on.
I am here.
He's there.
Got it. You're here.
There.
Stalder.
Here.
Somerville.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
That's 9 present and 0 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. All right. The next item on the agenda for a special meeting, City Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to read the notice for this evening's meeting?
Well, yeah, I was going to go to the public comment on non-agenda items, but why don't we have you do that, City Clerk? And I see Councilmember Stalder. Councilmember Stalder, did you need recognition?
Thank you. I was wondering if we were going to do the pledge since it's a special meeting, not a work session.
I wasn't going to do the pledge, but if council members would like to, we can.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. Why don't those of you that that brought this up go ahead and lead us off? Yeah. Go ahead, Councilmember O'Doherty.
I pledge allegiance
To the
to
flag.
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, sure. Simply worried about getting right to the heart of this meeting. It's fine to do the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. And I understand some people think we should do it at every meeting, including the work sessions. That's something that the council can talk about in the future. All right, City Clerk, did you want to read the notice for the special meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the Laramie City Council will be held Tuesday, March 30th, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. via Zoom webinar ID 894-7118-3948, passcode 319084 at City Hall Council Chambers, 406 Ivinson Avenue, Laramie, Wyoming, for the following purpose. Number 1, public comment on non-agenda items, aggregate time limit 30 minutes. And number 2, resolution 2021-18, establishment of an ad hoc working group for police and community.
Thank you, City Clerk. All right, council members, I'm going to go to item number 4, which is public comment on non-agenda items. In other words, public comment on things other than our special meeting, our single special meeting topic this evening. Do we have members of the public who want to speak to the council about anything else? Please indicate by raising. Yes, City Clerk.
You did have 2 requests ahead of time. First, we have Casey Prevendell.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if they're with us. I see a couple of phone numbers, and I'm not sure who they are.
And City.
If you are.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, if you're on your phone, if you hit *9, it will raise your hand so we can recognize you.
And City Clerk, I was just going to check. These are folks that want to speak to non-agenda items.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right. They'll let us know. All right, I have a number. Don't have the name, so I apologize. I can't recognize your presence at our meeting by name. But if you could go ahead and give us your name, and we will give you the floor for public comment.
Hi, my name is Jessica Nada. I am of 420 South 22nd Street. My non-agenda item comment is in regard to Wyoming House Bill number 0198, City Council Resolution number 2021-19. I have 3 minutes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. For the next 3 minutes, I will be saying nothing. I have a timer, and I am starting it now. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, we have a phone number ending in 8460.
Hi, I wanted to talk on the agenda, not on the non-agenda item.
Okay, thank you. We have Judy Snoke.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm unmuted. Good. Thank you.
Snoke, thank you.
I want to express dismay with what happened earlier this week regarding House Bill 198, when the head of the group completely cut off Janine Jordan, never gave Paul Weaver an opportunity to speak, and I can't find anything new about what is happening. Is this just going to go straight down the tubes or what? If you all have some enlightenment, I would appreciate an update on that bill. Because I agree with our city's position. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Snoke. Appreciate that.
Miss Snoke. When have I ever needed to be Miss Snoke? Thank you.
I'll say this. I like to use people's first names and first and last names generally, but then other people remind me that I shouldn't do that. Judy, it's always good to have you at our meeting. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council members, I'm going to speak briefly to the issue of this bill because it seems like it's something that people want some information about. House Bill 198 is moving through the legislature. It's moving through the process. It's gone through 3 readings in the House. It has gone through 2 readings in the state Senate. It's a bill dealing with water and an independent water system for the University of Wyoming. And when I say independent, I mean independent from the city's water system. We have had some opportunity for input on the bill. It has not affected the outcome of the legislation. And individuals that might be interested in that can research it on the state legislature's website. You can go there, read the text of the bill. There's also been some reporting about it in the Laramie Boomerang. And that's all I'll say about it right now. City Manager, I see that you've raised your hand, so recognizing you. City Manager, you're muted.
Thank you. Wanted to share that we've also posted all of this information, excuse me, on the City of Laramie website. There is a link on the front page if folks are interested in reading more history, and there's a link to follow the bill as well as it moves to 3rd reading in the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. That's important. Yes, there is some background information available for people on the city's website if they want to take a look at it. And I regret omitting that. But now folks have that information. All right. Let's now move into our single subject. I'll check City Clerk just one more time to see if we have anybody that's indicated they want to speak to a non-agenda item tonight. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
I see no other hands, and I still do not see Casey on the call.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, City Clerk, and we'll check at the end of the meeting after the special meeting topic has been discussed. If there's comment on a non-agenda item, we'll check at the end of the meeting. All right. We need someone to bring this item forward so that we can open up discussion and public comment. Council members, I'd like us, if you agree, to have the focus of this meeting tonight be generally on the public comment surrounding this issue as opposed to a great deal of discussion amongst the council. So after the introduction of the item, my intention is to move immediately to public comment, but we do need someone to bring it forward, I think, for the purpose of procedure. Vice Mayor Pierce?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I've got some amendments I'd like to talk about. So I'm not sure if, I've got like potentially three. So we might want to have a little council discussion because it's a resolution, it's not an ordinance, and they're not major changes at all, but I would like just to work on this. I don't have the intro open. I do have the resolution open though, so maybe someone else can bring it onto the floor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Pierce. I'll state
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. I'm going to reiterate that I believe that in discussion previously, the council had not intended to have a great deal of debate and to work this resolution. And my feeling is that if we're going to do that, that should be reserved for a future meeting because we have a great deal of council input on this. So we may need to have some discussion about what our intentions are. Councilmember Brewster?
I never thought this resolution being brought up tonight. I thought we were only going to open it to the public for discussion. I thought this would not have anything to do with any vote on this resolution.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewster. That was my impression as well. The reason I believe we have to have a motion on it so that we can begin to entertain discussion, which is the only reason I'm asking for the motion right now. Councilmember Harrington, you were seeking recognition.
Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, I would just like to introduce the item.
Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve resolution 2021-18 to establish the ad hoc working group for police and community under the direction of the mayor, city manager, and city attorney, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign.
Second.
Council members have had the motion and a second from Councilmember Cumby. At this time, I'm going to move I won't be moving anything. I'll be opening the item open for public comment. City Clerk, I also have the attendees screen, and I'm just going to go in order of hands up so far. As we start to have more individuals that probably indicate that they want to speak with a hand, as we are right now, and I don't know who's come first, I'm going to move down the list as I have it. And given that I don't really have, and I don't believe the city clerk has any better method of knowing who's come first or second, I'm just going to go through the list in order. The order I have right now, and that I will call on people, is as follows. Mr. Annenson, Ms. Rosenland, I believe it's Mr. Matamore, and then I have a screen name that is just Bella. And that's the order that we're going to follow for the time being. Mr. Annenson, when you are admitted into the room, you'll have the floor. There you are, sir. You have the floor and 3 minutes. Thank you. Not hearing you just yet. On my screen for attendees, it's indicating that Mr. Annenson is muted. Mr. Annenson, you might need to move your cursor around if you're using this on a computer and go down and hit the unmute button. And if you're using the phone, City Clerk, I think, was it *6 to unmute?
Correct.
All right. I thought I heard something.
Mr. Annenson, if you would like to call in, I'll watch for your phone number to pop up.
City Clerk, why don't we do that? We'll come back to Mr. Annenson because we do have 31 other people. Mr. Annenson, last time before you call in, I want to make sure that you're able to speak, but we may have to have you call in. Still can't hear anything. So I'm going to move on, Council, to the next speaker, if there isn't any objection. All right. Moving on to the next speaker, and that is Ms. Rosenlund. You have the floor in 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Tracy Rosenlund. I've been a Laramie resident for over 12 years, and I'm a Wyoming native. I am also the Director of Civilian Oversight for Albany County for Proper Policing. I just wanted to stand up and make a comment that I am grateful that this special work session has been created to look at this resolution for the work group. I think it's a very promising step forward for policing in our community to help restore any restore positive working relationships between community members and the policing and our police force. I think it's important to note that this working group is really important to start this process, because after the city passed the resolution last June to initiate this, it came from a lot of outcry, if you will, from the public on many different stances. And I think we all know that many times the drive to be able to sustain over a period of time does fall off, but that we are still here adamantly supporting this step towards an oversight board in Laramie. And it's important because the COB would be able to hear from voices who don't necessarily think that our policing is working just fine here, including people who may have had bad interactions with law enforcement or more serious complaints, because they're not likely to take those complaints to an agency that is who they're complaining about. It creates another outlet for people for our citizens to be able to feel like they are being heard. And so I just wanted to say again, we're here, we really support this. We think this is a logical step forward, and we look forward to moving on with this. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have Mr. Annenson available yet?
Mr. Mayor, we have a phone number in 7851. I believe that may be him.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
You have the floor. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you all for listening to me again. because I think it's important that you guys listen to the actual community and what they feel. Now, I was under the assumption when I first had my first discussion with the vice mayor that our police chief was in favor of this item by what she had told me on the phone. Yet, when she told me on the phone that he was 100% behind it, he thought it was a good deal, and I can tell she's really listening to what I'm saying. She's just looking down at the ground. But she told me to my face that one thing, and it upset me that somebody on our city council could, I don't want to say it, but I guess I'm going to say it, would lie to me on the phone. So if somebody's going to lie to me about that, and I talked with another person who made a statement that the same statement was made to them from the vice mayor. So if this is such a good thing and the police chief wants it, why are you saying that he wants it if he doesn't want it? It's just not a right thing to be saying to people. Now, I know that this is a little tiny thing to be talking about, but I think that the city council, if you guys are all gung-ho about having this and everything, you need to make sure that he wants it. If he doesn't want it, it shouldn't be done. It should not be done. And I don't care how many whiny little people there are in this city that will want to cry about, I got a ticket here, I got a ticket there. If I would get a ticket for anything, I would live up to it. Because they enforce the laws. We don't need some other group telling them how to enforce a law. And if you want to have this committee, might I please make a suggestion? Can I ask you guys so we can have a, how would you say it, a city council advisory board committee to look out after what you guys do? How would you like that? Somebody looking over your shoulders all the time. That is all I'm going to say. I'll let the next person say what they want to, and I thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Goodbye.
Council members, before we move on to further comment, I'm going to make our usual reminder that during periods of public comment, we ask that we avoid specific personalities and try to stick to general comments about policy. I would normally not allow comment to continue that I thought was specific to individuals. The vice mayor is a rather long-serving member of this chamber and is able to put comments in context. So I felt like this evening it was better to make sure that we leave comment wide open. But I'm going to remind members of the public to avoid specific personalities and try to stick to generalities of policy. That's the purpose of our public comment period. And I appreciate the willingness of folks to stay within those parameters. The next individual up for public comment, I believe, is Mr. Matamore.
Yes.
Matamore, you have the floor. Thank you.
One of the major difficulties I have left with this thing is that it is on its face biased against the police department. What you have for the nominating committee, the institutional members on it, that you call for on it, it's all well and good you have diverse community representation, but this committee will advise on policy that is going to be used by individual police officers in patrol cars on the street. You have the chief, great man, but he's a boss. You have basically other people who are bosses. You had civilian employee. You got one cop. You've got to have the average Joe policeman work with this from the beginning. Because if you go to the troops and wake up one day, form them up a roll call and said, this is the way the cows eat the cabbage, or what you learned in policing, you've made a mistake. These people are going to resist it. They're going to resign. They're going to find other jobs where they get a lot more pay than we can afford. So my basic problem with this is that innate unfairness. If you want true advice on policy, put everybody else on there, throw us 3 or 4 cops. Guys are in patrol cars. And I'd rather have them participate in this. That would be asking the people who have to follow any advice and consent and policy that comes out of this. And they should have a little bit of a say in what's going to happen. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Mattimore. And I'm going to point out that Mr. Mattimore just provided us an excellent example of generalized policy-specific public comment. I'm going to move on now to the next person that we had on the list. And I have a screen name of just the first name. I'd ask you to provide us your full name and then your public comment, and you have the floor.
Testing 1, 2, 3. You hear me? Thank you. Well, this evening, we're going to change it up a little bit there, Mr. Weaver, because of your request. We will not be exposing the facts of the case that we're dealing with the corruption that we're all talking about here. We're going to go ahead and just give our fellow Americans and fellow citizens some words of encouragement to not stop and to keep on going, that we're doing a good thing, that we're keeping it going, and that anybody who is corrupt should be worried. So I will start off by saying that we have multiple experiences with selective enforcement and with excessive force, and as Janine Jordan knows, with corrupt usage of cop cams and authority like hers too, inappropriate use of authority. Excuse me, I broke protocol there, I apologize. Hello, fellow caring Laramie citizens, city council members, and all other ears that are listening. Thank you to all who have sacrificed their energy, their pursuits, and some their blood and bodies. Thank you to all the officers, deputies, the women, the men, all who serve our community with ethics, loyalty, teamwork, and integrity. Today is a day of celebration. A celebration of freedom to confront your accuser, to celebrate the mind of a free man who can stand on the principles of American roots, proudly standing against corrupted authority who has vastly overstepped their role to serve our community, and have taken the standard of justice in word only. And with that, I appreciate all you and all your service as well. God bless you all.
Sir, could we get your name for the public record? For your public
Certainly. I apologize. My daughter's name is Bella. That's where that came from. I'm not sure how it got on the phone. But my name is Andrew Joel Fonte.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you making time to share your comment with us this evening.
Thanks for having the time.
And members of the public that are in attendance, my reminders about protocol aren't to reprimand. It's simply just a reminder about what our protocol is. We understand that in the course of public comment, sometimes a name is used, and we're not here to try to reprimand, just to try to remind people to try to keep the comments in that general framework. I see we have the next member of the public that would like to make public comment. I have a screen name of Rex Reese. I'm not sure if that's who's speaking. If so, you have the floor, and just go ahead and provide us your full name for the record and your comment.
Rex Reese, went to college here. I've been back here 17 years, retired career military officer. Okay. Dealt with a lot of big organizational things. I read through this resolution multiple times, and it kind of blew me away with, and I'm going to use 3 words to describe this thing it's going to create: one-sided, laziness, and hypocrisy. Okay. The persons are already named on this, and the resolution does name very specific people by their position. And those that are probably get approved by the council, we're going to represent just a liberal progressive point of view. It's based on the council makeup. Okay. People are going to vote for their kind. What this amounts to is you pick the yes people who share your views and let them tell you what you want to hear. No conflicting point of views. This is a very lopsided thing. It's not going to welcome the different points of views over our police department. Second aspect I see here, I'm going to flat out call it, is laziness on part of the council. The council is supposed to provide oversight on the entire city government. That takes a lot of work to stay well informed. So how do you avoid the work? Appoint a group of like-minded people. Let them do the work for you. They provide you with the info that supports a lot of preconceived ideas, and you vote for it without spending much time or effort. That's shirking your responsibilities as council and letting somebody else do the grunt work and provide it to you. Sorry, that doesn't work. The final aspect of this thing is, I'm going to call it hypocrisy. You're proposing to subject the police department to a politically hostile oversight board. These people's point of view is very, very different. Their preconceived conclusion for most people is there's a lot of problems with law enforcement. This is a national trend across the country. Defund the police, hamstring the police. Okay, if you think the idea in Laramie is any different, that's not true. Okay, remember how the disruption we had and all the harassment of the police department by some of the protesters last year. There's the truth right there. Okay, now let me ask you this. Are any of the other departments of city government getting an oversight board? I mean, we're going to subject one part of us to some serious oversight here. What about the other departments? Okay, or are we just singling one out because it threatens our power? No. Well, why don't they get oversight boards? They provide city services. Let's move to the top here. How about the city manager? She's in charge of the police department and all the other departments. So let's use the model that you created, which basically appoints a politically hostile board to oversee you and create a highly conservative oversight board over the city manager and the senior staff. Okay, shouldn't a leader stand up to the same level of scrutiny as their subordinates? And this board should have the same access to the council to share their findings. A good leader would gladly put themselves into this position, leading by example, leading from the front. They won't. They're derelict in their duties and hypocritical in their character. So if you vote for this resolution, which I'm against, you need to pass another resolution that provides a civilian oversight board for the city manager and senior staff, and maybe eventually every other department in this city. What goes around comes around. Do unto others as they would do unto you, and treat people like you want to be treated. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and taking time out of your evening to share them with the City Council. Moving to next public comment, we have Taylor Norton as the screen name anyway. Taylor Norton, you have the floor in 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay? So as you said, my name is Taylor Norton. I've been living in Laramie for nearly 10 years now. I just wanted to address some of the things I've heard in previous public comments. A lot of interesting argumentation. I think that there are some flawed logic that people have been throwing around. I would just like to address a few particular points. Some folks are complaining that there isn't enough police representation on the proposed committee. I would argue the opposite, that there's too much, because what is being suggested is that the police should have a say in what kind of oversight they receive, where I would contend that in the event that a police force is corrupt and is headed by a corrupt person, not saying that's the case, but if it were, then there would be no incentive for them to institute any kind of realistic oversight over themselves. They could just do as they pleased and face no kind of consequences for those actions. The purpose of an oversight board that's led by the community is to be a force to counteract that exact scenario and prevent it from happening. We want to hold our city employees accountable for their actions, particularly those who are armed and are responsible for maintaining the peace, and have, in instances that we have seen multiple times across the country, often they fail to live up to the incredibly high standards that we place upon them. Moreover, trying to include further police presence on this type of committee just places a greater deal of burden, more responsibility on the police than already exists for them. And I think that's unfair to a police force that is not corrupt. So the idea that there should be a greater police presence on a community oversight board that's tasked with monitoring police activity and making sure everything is above board is silly, I think, to put it generously. As for wanting to institute a similar type of oversight board for other governmental employees, I think that is also silly, because as I mentioned a second ago, the police are armed. The police have the greatest capacity to cause harm to the members of the public if they were to choose to do so. You don't have city councilors who are paid to walk around with firearms. You have that from the police. And if a city councilor were to do something violent and God forbid, kill a citizen of Laramie, they would certainly be subject to the type of scrutiny from the law. I see my time's up. I yield. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Norton, and thank you for taking time out of your evening to share your views with the City Council this evening. I see the next person that we have is Linda Devine. Linda Devine, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? My understanding tonight is to determine or have public comment on an ad hoc committee, right? So we don't even know what it would consist of. And so I would obviously recommend that you would vote in favor of that. Something I would like to say, and it'll probably make everybody on all sides mad, is I really get tired of the word corrupt. There may be things that folks do, whether it's with law enforcement. I might see something that I think is excessive force. That doesn't mean I think that the whole department is corrupt. Are there things that I think need change? Yes, I do. But I don't see it as being corrupt. And I don't know, when people calling in on both sides talking about corruptness, I just think that it really ought to stop. I think that we're not moving forward with anything. I see this as more of a community approach. I think there's always things that we can do to improve. And my hope would be that City Council would pass a resolution to establish a ad hoc committee and see where it goes. I appreciate the time, and good luck.
Thank you, Ms. Devine. And we appreciate you making time in your evening to come and share your views at the City Council. City Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, you also had a pre-registration from Lori Hill.
Let's recognize Lori Hill. And you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, well, thank you for recognizing me and for offering this opportunity to citizens out there. I am essentially born and raised here, was gone for 18 years, but have been back since 2010. So pretty much 50 years in Laramie. I I would like to say a couple of things. If this were to ever happen, I think there needs to be people like retired law enforcement officers on it. Because if you consider, would you put non-trained or citizens that have no training in dentistry to have oversight on a dentistry oversight board? Probably not. And in a conversation with another citizen about my age yesterday, excellent point brought up. Anyone that would be on this committee better really, really know their laws and really put all the foresight they can into any regulations or new rules put in place. Because if they had what I'm going to call unexpected consequences that went south from this, not only would the city of Laramie be looking at probably some lawsuits, but those people on that citizen oversight board would also. And that's kind of all I have to say. I know several police officers. I'm personal friends with 3 that I can name right off. And so I think we've got some upstanding citizens that are well trained. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your views with the City Council. Other public comment. We are going to primarily try to have people speak only once this evening, depending on the volume we get, and then I will check with the council about how they'd like to proceed with further public comment. Right now we have City Manager. Did you need recognition before we move on to further public comment? All right. We have Timberly Vogel, and we're going to recognize Timberly Vogel. You have the floor.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Thanks. Thanks, Council, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Timberly Vogel. I just have a short comments, just going off of some things that have been said earlier tonight. I think it's important for the community and the council to understand, unlike the military, city police and city council work for the people in the community. So to assume that any type of community oversight board, but specifically, as we're talking about tonight, a police community oversight board is hostile in any way, disregards the oversight that the city already has employed by hosting meetings like this, having public information online, and holding public comment periods. So they're basically, in like Janine Jordan's little diagram that she often shows, there is oversight of the city council, which is just by the people in the community. And I think that that's been handled and has been led really well by how you all foster these meetings, especially in times of Zoom. I do have some concerns, though, particularly with one person's comment earlier talking about the chief of police, but also those concerns stem from personal communications with the chief of police, where he has, in fact, verbalized that he has no interest or sees very little value in a community oversight board. And so knowing that in mind, I would just urge the council to reconsider his position on the board, and not just him personally, but just having the chief of police in this process, because as we've all known, this is something we're just now talking about establishing the ad hoc. So this isn't something that's really even been tested yet or put into place in Laramie, where someone as important as a role as the chief of police has already such a negative perception about it. And so I imagine that would dilute the efficiency of the COB and dilute the openness of the community members on the COB if they were to go into that workspace with someone with so much power in the police force, knowing that they do not agree with what the COB is. So that's all I have to say tonight. Thanks for your time, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for taking time out of your evening to share views with the City Council. Moving on to further public comment, we have Lindsay Conyers. Ms. Conyers, you've got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you for hearing my comments tonight. I have been trying to figure out what statistics from the Laramie Police Department specifically have prompted the need for this committee, or even the ad hoc one to even look at it. I don't know that the Laramie Police Department itself has had instances where this is even called for. And so I ask for someone to reach out to me with some statistics that, if they're there, that would say that the police department here in Laramie, specifically the Laramie Police Department, needs this oversight board. I don't know that it is even justified by the statistics of the police department. And that's all I have to say, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for sharing your comments with the City Council. Moving on to further comment, we have, looks like Billy Harris, you have the floor.
Can you hear me all right? Cool. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Billy Harris, and I'm commenting to encourage you all to remove any voting police presence from this ad hoc committee. The purpose of the Civilian Oversight Board is external public presence in our interpretation and practice of policing. The power and privilege that police officers hold will only be defended by any police presence on this committee, and their voting presence is harmful to genuine critique, insight, and action towards possible harm, wrongdoing, or bias by officers. I don't personally believe that the police chief is in favor of this resolution, as many police officers wouldn't be, and his presence and any police presence on this committee is harmful to the purpose of it. Specifically, I encourage you to remove police presence on this committee within the current police oversight representation section, including those in the Civil Service Commission, the sworn management member, the police civilian member, and the police legal management member. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for taking time to share your views. Next, for public comment, we have Amanda Hittman. Debbie, you've got the floor.
Hello, can you hear me all right? Okay. Hi, yes. I am part of ACOP, Albany County for Proper Policing, and I just wanted to dispel some misunderstandings that there seem to be about community oversight. So from our understanding, it seems to be that people don't seem to think that the members of a civilian oversight board would have any training, but they would be extensively trained in best practices. There's a national organization, NACOL, that does training and that does best practices and research. Also, currently, the working group has law enforcement members slated to be a part of it, and I would echo Billy and Timber's comments that because of recommendations from ACOP and NACOL, there should not be law enforcement on it. That doesn't mean that the Civilian Oversight Board wouldn't discuss the issues with law enforcement. It's just that this board, in order to work and to operate properly, would need to be independent and have independence in order to have the confidence of the public in order to get around the problem that we currently see, which is lack of confidence and lack of ability for people to comment and complain with confidence to an entity that is separate from the police. We feel that that it's unlikely that people are complaining to police because police currently police themselves. As far as oversight right now, police are an unelected body that police themselves. Our residents' constitutional rights converge around policing practices. And they're the only entity that hold the explicit ability to take away a resident's life and liberty. And we think that it's very important and essential that we have civilian oversight and input from the community. School districts are subject to boards, oversight boards. the city council is subject to the input from the voters. And we think that law enforcement should have the same oversight and input. And so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for the time that you've taken out of your evening to share your views with the city council. Next, we have public comment from Laura Francis. Ms. Francis, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you all so much for hearing me tonight. I am actually a citizen. I'm a fourth generation Laramie resident, and I work for the school district. And I am actually completely on the opposite page of the two prior citizens that spoke tonight. I think it is absolutely essential that we have law enforcement representatives on the oversight board, because it's like you have to be able to have the perspective of people who are doing the job and living the life day in and day out, have a voice. If we don't give them a voice within that group, we limit our ability to understand who they are, what they do, and how they go about doing their job within the training that they've been given and within the circumstances that arise. I've worked in the jail, and I have been literally 3 feet away from many criminals before in my life. And it, as the prior person said, you know, it's a job where it's life and liberty, but it's the police have the opportunity to take life and liberty, but they also are up against extraordinarily difficult situations that none of us can really relate to unless we've actually had a criminal act happen to us. So I am disagreeing wholeheartedly with the prior two people. I believe that there should be representatives of the police upon that board, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for providing your views for us. Next up, we have Chris Harmley, and you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me okay? All right, thank you. Having police on a police oversight board is a conflict of interest. I think that's important to recognize. It is a conflict of interest. The police are not above the law. Having them on a board like that is a conflict of interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing your views with the council. Waiting for further public comment. Once we close the public comment this evening, we will not open it again. And City Council, I'm going to take a moment now to check with the council members for how they'd like to proceed with a second round, and if they want people that have spoken before to be given time, an additional block of time. Input from the council on that matter. We'll go to Councilmember Schuster first, and then those others that have raised their hands. Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you. This meeting tonight was for the public, so I think that when people are done with the first round, just like when we hold a city council meeting, we like to let all councilors go at least once, and then sometimes we speak again. I'm in favor of letting people speak. This is the whole reason for this meeting tonight was for the public. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Schuster. Other council members that want to speak to this? Councilmember O'Doherty, I think the first time I checked, you had put your hand up. Then we'll go to Councilmembers Harrington and Gabriel. Councilmember O'Doherty.
Just one, when a council member or staff are slammed and called liars and corrupt, I would like people to have an opportunity to speak up to the issue that was raised if they want to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. I'll speak to that, which is addressed in our Code of Conduct, which I think is a poorly named document, which is that we have a format and it's been voted on by the council. So as the chair of the meetings, until we change that, I'm going to do my best to keep us in adherence with those policies and procedures. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilor Schuster. This meeting was for the public. I would encourage the public. Of course, they can use their time how they would like, but I would encourage them to not just duplicate what they said before or repeat what's been said by others. If they wouldn't mind using it for bringing new information to the council, I think that would be helpful for all of us.
Councilmember Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. The same with Councilor Schuster and Harrington. I agree. I think a lot of times in our discussions, you hear comments from other people that generate different views from maybe what you had thought previous. And so if we give the public another chance, sometimes we can get maybe a little different opinion based on what they heard previously. So I think, sure, this is open to the public.
Very good. Council members, by way of making this meeting as productive as possible, which is both through our hearing views, either in favor or against the ad hoc committee, which is what the resolution addresses, not a oversight board, but the ad hoc committee as outlined in the resolution. I would like to ask if the city manager wants to address any points regarding what the resolution contains and perhaps some clarity issues that appear to the chair, council members, to be emerging in this discussion. City manager, and then we'll go back to public comment.
Mayor, I'd be happy to provide an outline as set forth in the cover sheet, and I assume you all can hear me okay. You'll recall, Council, that on June 30th, the Council adopted Resolution 2020-38, which established some objectives for staff with respect to policing services and community relations, following a lot of public comment and dialogue that occurred in May and June of 2020. Staff reported back to you last month on February 23rd regarding the objectives that you had put for us in June. We included a report of best practices and kind of a research brief surrounding the use of citizen oversight boards. This looked at strengths and weaknesses of the prevalent oversight board models, along with a case study and some citations to the original sources, hoping that other interested folks in the community might take the time to explore those materials. Certainly, we've heard from a few this evening that have done that. Subsequent to that February 23rd meeting, we were asked to come forward with a recommendation. So what has been recommended to you in Resolution 2021-38 on the table this evening is that we form at this time an ad hoc working group, which would review our municipal policing practices. Those are things like understanding what training occurs, what our use of force policies are, what is the legal framework and the service statistics that we can share with the community through this ad hoc working group to build really a knowledgeable panel that can unpack and examine these issues over the course of a year, and then come back at the end of that year to provide some recommendations to city leadership. It is my opinion that it is premature at this time to move directly to implementation of any form of citizen oversight structure. The reason for that is that I think we do not fully understand the community's concerns at this point, and the reason I've suggested the ad hoc working group to you as a starting point is to do that very thing. The city attorney further has advised you last month that there are some statutory limitations with respect to personnel matters, and so that's another element of decision making that has caused me to recommend to you tonight this ad hoc working group. The other thing I'll mention is that I think, Council, you know as well as staff do, that many of the concerns that we've heard voiced at the many public meetings that we've had this last year really were wide-ranging concerns that dealt with principles of criminal justice and the criminal justice system, and we're really well beyond the very structured and legally constrained arena of policing in a proper sense. We are also seeing federal level discussions and potentially legislation surrounding criminal justice reforms as well. So for all of those reasons, I really felt like an ad hoc working group was the appropriate next step for the community. We've heard from residents tonight, as we have all year, that there are concerns. People want to understand better how we train, what our policies are. And so it's a critical moment in time for our community where I think we can do better to be more transparent and bring people up to speed and create through this ad hoc working group some folks that are really knowledgeable at the end of 12 months and understand how Laramie's municipal policing works, what our policies are, and then can bring informed perspectives at the end of those 12 months regarding some of these major issues that we're hearing people want to talk about, notably oversight. What I want to reiterate, though, is that what I have recommended as of this evening in the resolution does not consist of any oversight for police at this point in time, other than the oversight that we already have within our governance structure. I also want to talk, if I could, Mayor, just briefly about why I've recommended the composition of the ad hoc group that I have. It's always interesting when you make a recommendation to hear folks on one side say, well, you should have these people at the table, and then there's always the opposite point of view that says, well, you shouldn't have those folks at the table. What I've tried to structure here is a group that will, in fact, be balanced. And I recognize that this is a large group, 20 people. The city has 14 other boards and commissions, none of which are quite this large. But those other 14 boards and commissions that oversee other aspects of municipal operation are standing committees and not ad hoc committees. The reason I felt that this group needed to be fairly large is really to try to bring a balance of perspectives to the table. So just walking you through the resolution, I'm recommending 8 residents. 6 of those residents have to have no qualifications, no training, nothing other than interest in learning more about how we deliver policing services within the city of Laramie. 2 of those community residents I've suggested should be engaged in providing social services locally. And that stems from so much of the dialogue that we've had this last year, where people are concerned about police being put in positions of really being the first social service providers in a system where there is insufficient, sometimes, social services to really serve the needs of the community. So in total, 8 residents, 2 of whom would have some specialty as social service providers, and 6 others who just have interest and who want to learn more. I have suggested a nominating committee choose that slate of 8 community resident members. The reason for that is that I just feel like we'd like to get this thing moving quickly. A nominating committee is a well-known structure for getting a committee propped up and appointed quickly, and the folks I've recommended to the nominating committee are leaders in the community right now. All of these folks, but for one, have confirmed to me that they would be willing to serve in this capacity. All that they would do is interview those applicants and then recommend a slate of members to the City Council for confirmation. And I have provided some selection criteria to the nominating committee, being sure that they are mindful that we want the community resident members to be representative of diverse communities within our city. I will tell you, in researching other communities who have similar boards like this, this is typical. Although there is no one way the communities do this, it is typical to use a nominating committee to look for diverse perspectives, etc. Then beyond the 8 resident members, I have noted some institutional representatives. These folks, there are 7 of them, and they would be appointed by their respective institutions. Those include the Albany County School District. Again, I've confirmed with each of these institutional members their willingness to participate in this exercise. The reason for the school district is we are a close partner with Albany County School District through our School Resource Officer program. I felt like they had a valid voice and perspective to bring to the table, particularly with some youth issues. Also, two academics, I would say, as I've read through public comment, people have said, why do you have the academics on the committee? Well, the reason is that, as I said earlier, a lot of the concerns we've heard from folks have been well beyond policing in its strict sense and really more broadly based in criminal justice and diversity issues. So two folks from the University of Wyoming I've suggested here would bring that expertise to the table. And my hope is help this ad hoc working group differentiate between policing issues that the city of Laramie can deal with specifically, and then looking at other issues that are really, frankly, outside of the wheelhouse of the city as a municipal government, and help the committee to sort through the difference of those things. Also, a member from the Associated Students of the University of Wyoming. I've confirmed with them that they are willing to make a commitment to participate here. My reason for that is that the ASUW population is a huge part of our community. They've been very active on this issue, and they're very eager to participate. Crime victim witness here in Albany County. I'm suggesting a representative from that group. They've agreed to do this if you will have them, and they would bring victim perspectives to the table. Then by contrast, I've recommended one legal defense representative. I'm still talking with Equal Justice Wyoming, and then also with another group that I've identified that might be the institutional venue whereby we could bring the perspective to the table that is the opposite of victims, right? You have victims, and then you have folks who've been through the criminal justice system and the defense attorneys that defend them, and bring that perspective to the table too, particularly as people may become interested in discussing issues beyond policing, and again, in that criminal justice realm. And then lastly, in the institutional representatives, a member of the Albany County Community Mental Health Board. I think it's obvious why I've suggested that that group appoint someone to this committee, and those are your 7 institutional representatives. Lastly, then, there are 6 folks involved in current oversight of policing, including both police management as well as civilian non-sworn management and elected officials that are involved in that chain of command that exists here at the city. And then lastly, I am recommending that we have a municipal officer who is what we would call internal to the city non-command, meaning not a member of the police management team, but a regular officer who can bring to the table the perspectives that talk about what they do every single day. And then lastly, the police chaplain who has agreed to serve in this capacity. I think it's important to just candidly humanize the work that these folks do, to have the police chaplain there. I think he has a unique perspective in working with the police department every single day, and could really bring a different view to this committee as we consider what police officers do, and frankly, what their own health and wellness effects are from doing this very difficult work to keep us all safe. I know I've talked for a long time. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of explain what is in my thought process here. I would certainly welcome your input, whatever the council want to do in this regard, and recognizing that I've made the best recommendation that I can to you. It may not be perfect, but of course this is why we have this process we do. We'll vet through it as a community, and we'll find the right mix for Laramie. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. I am now going to direct a question to the City Attorney. Mr. Southard is with us this evening. And the question I have is, given that this is not the first ad hoc committee formed by the City Council to consider a policy issue, I want to clarify whether or not an ad hoc committee formed by the City Council is bound to the same public meetings law as other boards and commissions, and of course the City Council itself. City Attorney, if you'd like to weigh in on that, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, as I'm sure the Council.
It is not, Your Honor.
Would it be if that matter was clarified in an authorizing resolution?
Yes, I mean that's the way you have done that for other boards and commissions, meaning that boards and commissions in purely advisory roles, are not bound by the Public Meetings Act. You can require that, but you do not have to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. City Manager, for the purpose of making this meeting as useful as possible, I am going to ask if there are any other members of staff that have indicated to you over the course of our meeting tonight if they wanted to add anything before we go back to public comment, which I imagine will probably take up more time in our meeting tonight. Are there any other staff members that want to provide any information to give this discussion context? I'm not seeing anyone. If someone indicates over the course of the discussion that they'd like to, we'll do that. We'll now go to public comment again, and we will allow second round of public comment, even if individuals have addressed the council before. And I would just say, as the chair of these meetings, I like to be able to check with the council members about how they want to proceed with these public comment times before I move forward. So we'll go ahead again, and I'm just going to go in order. I have names, but also phone numbers, and I'm not sure if there's overlap, City Clerk, between, as I know sometimes people have a screen name, but they're also going to be speaking to us through the phone. I'm not sure if there's overlap. But we'll go and we will recognize Mr. Annenson again, if they're ready. And if you're ready, Mr. Annenson, you have the floor.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me now? Okay, first of all, I would like to apologize to the whole city council for saying what I said. That was just me. That's the way I was raised, and I'm sorry for calling anybody out. I didn't mean to if it caused harm, but in the same aspect, I don't want to have harm brought upon the other person I mentioned in that statement. Because the police chief is an honorable person. And that is all I want to say. I wanted to say that right after you had called me out on saying that, Paul. And I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. And I want to apologize to you and the vice mayor and everybody else in the chambers and on the city council and, you know, everyone. So that being said, I'm still not for this, but I want to say I'm sorry. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Annenson, and we appreciate those comments. We're happy to hear from your friends at home there. And I did not want you to feel as though you've been called out specifically. Those comments provided an opportunity to outline our general practices and the rules we try to adhere to for public comment. I did not mean for you to feel personally reprimanded, and I tried to make that clear, but I know that can be difficult sometimes, but we appreciate your comments. Chief Stalder, I see that you've got a hand raised, and although it's the public comment period, I am going to recognize the chief of our police department right now for any comments that he might wish to add.
Eric, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just want to clarify, when I had a conversation with Mr. Annenson 2 weeks ago, he asked me the question about whether I believe that the city police department needed additional oversight. And my comment to him was that we did not. I did not indicate that I was opposed in any way to the ad hoc committee. And that may be a point of contention. I know that Vice Mayor Pierce has indicated that maybe there was some dispute there, but I just wanted to clarify that. And I did have a conversation that evening on the 2 weeks ago with the city manager, and then also last Friday with the city manager. I just want to make it clear that my conversation with Mr. Anderson was not that I believe that the ad hoc committee was not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but we didn't talk about that. I told him that, as I indicated back on the 23rd of February, as well as meetings last year, that I believed that the police department had adequate oversight at this time, and a citizen oversight board was not necessary. That should not be a surprise to anybody on council or members of the public. I just wanted to clarify that.
Appreciate that, Chief Stalder. I think that's useful for those of us here at this meeting to hear. Members of the council, I think our police chief, much like many other members of our city management and leadership folks across the spectrum of city government, is certainly here to provide us with professional opinion about directions that we go in, but ultimately in terms of decisions about whether we do or do not do something, that's not necessarily the role of our city management team. They provide options and they provide advice, but ultimately those decisions are made by the city council, and also incorporate feedback we hear from the public. And I think probably they all understand and agree with that, and we all understand that as well. But I appreciate those clarifying comments, and I appreciate the previous public comment before that. These are difficult conversations, and people have strong opinions, and we are here to hear those opinions. Next, I have a phone number, 307. Well, I'm not going to give out the full phone number, I guess, just for the sake of brevity. But you have the floor, and if you could provide us with your name for the record for public comment, we would appreciate it, and it's all yours.
Howdy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, all right, sounds good. Sorry, I think my video is a little behind. I am John Roos. I spoke at a few meetings last year, and I am a resident of Laramie. One thing that was repeatedly brought up tonight regarding the composition of the board is mentioning the inclusion of law enforcement officers. One comparison that was made was the school boards, and I would like to, based on what I was able to look up, generally employees of the school district are not allowed on the school boards that oversee them. It is a conflict of interest, and if we are going to compare oversight boards that way, I think that's something to take into account. I mean, there is definite differences here because one is elected and one's not, but I think that's a good comparison to start off of. Thank you. I have nothing else to say. I yield my time.
All right. And we appreciate you sharing your views and opinions with us. We'll go next, just following in order, and we'll go to Lindsay Conyers. Ms. Conyers, you have the floor.
Thank you. I did want to speak on what the city attorney said about the Open Meetings Act, and I would encourage you to, should this ad hoc committee be formed, to make those some of those meetings of that committee be open to the public. I know that there are questions that the public has that would also help guide that committee in the information that they're seeking, and that it would be helpful if they had public input more than those 8 residents. Aside from that, just a way that the community can communicate to the ad hoc board and the ad hoc board communicate back to them. While I appreciate these public comment sections of the council meetings, there's not, sometimes people have questions that need to be answered, and so having an open conversation involves that when someone asks a question, an answer is given. So I encourage those meetings, at least some of them, to be open to the public or questions. And then also the nominating committee, Ms. Jordan said that she had suggested people to that committee. And I just want to make sure that it's not just those suggested people that are included in the nomination process, and that that the nominating committee be able to bring their own suggestions forward as well. Because, I mean, with all due respect, I'm sure Janine doesn't know everyone in town. So, but I think that's a great idea to have that many residents involved in the committee, just because there is a great deal of interest, as evidenced by the amount of people that are here tonight and wanting to speak on this. A lot of people are interested, a lot of people are invested, and having them part of the conversation is essential. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in order of comments, I believe we have Mr. Manamore that would like to address the council again, and you have the floor. Please go ahead.
All right, there we go. Just to expand, well, first of all, forgive me for failure in etiquette here. Mayor and council members, thank you for the chance to talk tonight. I am looking at, to expand my remarks earlier on the admission of policemen to the ad hoc board. The function, as I read it, the way it was written, was that this is to gather information, as Ms. Jordan stated, and to basically advise on policy from the evidence they gather and the people they talk to over the course of a year, which is why I feel that it's really important that you have field officers. Perhaps it may be a field training officer. What you need is somebody who's going to analyze what this recommendation for policy might be in the light of how do you teach it to the police? How do you get the police the equipment to effectively pursue that recommended policy? Which is why I think you need the street cops, the training officers. Get somebody out of the academy in Casper to come down for that. But that's why you need the input of police on this. You can ask them to do a lot of things, but it's a lot of times it's just that 3-second gut instinct. And I could tell you a short story about my brother after 33 years on the job. You cannot hesitate. In that 3 seconds, a man with a knife can cover 40 feet easily. So, you know, you need to have practical policies, practical training, and you need the police input to get that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Metamore, for those comments. And council, if you allow me, I just want to reiterate to members of the public, I don't see my role here, and I know the council doesn't, to reprimand anyone for breaches of protocol, just to be available to remind folks of the format that we'd like to stick to. Certainly, we're not keeping score on etiquette or anything like that. I just have a position where I need to occasionally remind people of format and the format that we want to follow, and that's all that I'm doing. So please interpret it that way, members of the public. Mr. Reese, I have you next for your second round of comment, and I'd like to give you the floor now.
Yes, there's a change of venue. It's me. It's Sandy Reese. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Sandy Reese, and I am a tax-paying, long-term invested Laramie citizen. And once again, I would ask that you oppose the creation of a Citizen Oversight Board or an ad hoc committee for our fine Laramie Police Department. I would remind you that we already have a board, and it is the duly elected city councilors that are answerable to the voting citizens of Laramie. I grew up in this town, and I've called it home for many, many years. I left and came back. And sadly, it's not the town I grew up in anymore. The progressive influence of the university has grown to outsize influence, and I see the city jumping to their beck and call. the influx of out-of-state, non-invested, non-voting, temporary student activists have destroyed much of the small-town Western values that were the identity of Laramie. They don't care if their solution astronomically fails. They're only here temporarily. They will move to another state soon after finishing their indoctrination. They have no long-term invested interest in this town whatsoever, and quite frankly, wouldn't care if the program succeeds or fails. It would just be one more item to add to a resume. The council has allowed these socialist justice warriors free rein, as was evidenced by their last summer's marches down city streets in violation of city code, violent harassment of Laramie citizens just trying to get to and from work, foul language against many, and their aggressive takeover of City Hall during a council meeting. In response, city residents chose to counter their influence with a showing of peaceful support for our law enforcement officers and first responders, community support, and a general display of American patriotism. While Laramie Human Rights Network ran rampant on our streets, beating on cars and intimidating residents, obstructing traffic, the police appeared to be on stand-down orders. However, when I and other like-minded Laramie residents, property-owning, tax-paying, contributing, locally spending, law-abiding, community-supporting, voting residents chose to express our support, we were approached by and directed by LPD to behave. Evidence that it doesn't matter if you're right, if the opposing side screams the loudest and the scariest. On one occasion, an officer spoke to us to not block the sidewalk while Laramie Human Rights Network marched through the streets in violation of city code. When I asked, why us, not them, his non-committal response was, because you will comply. On another occasion, these individuals verbally accosted and threatened two older ladies. Some of us came to their protection, and an officer approached us and asked us to calm down and leave. The ladies had done nothing more than walk to their vehicles when the hoodie and mask-wearing kids screamed expletives at them. We asked the officer, why us, not them? He shrugged and rolled his eyes. We asked if LPD had been asked to stand down. He didn't answer, but the look on his face was one of sadness and disgust. Again, evidence that it doesn't matter as long as you scream the loudest and the scariest. Why do I tell you of these instances? It is to illustrate the point that the council has been hijacked by these socialists, pushing a progressive agenda that is not in keeping with the beliefs and wishes of a less vocal majority of Laramie citizens. Citizens who are residents, property owners, taxpayers, volunteers, parents of kids in our schools, local business owners, and local legal voters. Citizens who have a long-term vested interest in this town and just want to be left alone and live in peace. We don't need or want socialist justice warriors under the purview of the university, directing policy of our local police department. The board you propose is heavily biased against our LPD, and furthermore, they are unelected bureaucrats, unanswerable to anyone. I would ask that you do your job as our elected city council and not absolve your duty and responsibility to some bunch of activists that have absolutely no long-term interest in this city. They simply have it out for our cops because that is the current trend. Don't throw our cops under the bus because Laramie's hometown BLM demands action simply based off of capricious emotions. We, the residents of Laramie, want to see our police force recognized, appreciated, and respected for the service that they provide to our community. Thank you.
Thank you for those views and comments. We will move to the next public comment, and I'd like to recognize Linda Devine. Ms. Devine, thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Linda Devine, longtime Laramie resident. I've lived here since 1996. I haven't left and come back. I also pay taxes. I own two businesses, one of them which is devoted to nonprofit organizations, and I'm proud to be a social justice warrior. I'm invested in this community, and I just want to speak on the composition of the committee I appreciate you, Ms. Jordan, on looking at opportunities for defense attorneys to be involved. I'm wondering if perhaps you would look at the University Defender Aid Clinic. I believe Equal Justice Initiative is primarily more civil, but it's very possible they might be willing to lend their hand. So that was just my comment on that, on the composition of it. If you're wanting an agency as opposed to an individual defense attorney, I can certainly appreciate that. And I would just ask you to, if you would look into that. And again, just expressing my support for the ad hoc committee. I would just ask one other thing to council members. We've been invested in this, many of us, for over a year. And quite frankly, if you can probably tell from tonight, some of us are kind of worn out. We've talked to council, we've provide evidence-based information on the need for a board, and here we are a year later, now just starting an ad hoc committee. If that's what we need to do, that's fine. But it's really starting to get discouraging. I'm just gonna be honest with you. So appreciate your work, and I hope that you will vote in support of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those views with the council. Move on to further comments. Next up, we have Taylor Norton. Mr. Norton, you've got the floor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Before I begin, I'd like to quickly apologize. I think I was unmuted during a previous comment, and I believe I accidentally interrupted that person. That was not my intention. I was commenting on something completely unrelated. So to that person, I would like to apologize. I did not want to in any way distract from your public comment. Moving on to what I would like to discuss real quick. I have lived in Laramie for, as I said earlier, nearly a decade. I am strongly invested in this town. I'm not a temporary resident. I vote, I pay taxes, I buy locally, and I support the idea of a community oversight board of our police department because I think our government officials should be held accountable, and I think it's unreasonable to expect the city council to be so mindful of every minute detail of every little thing that goes on in this community. I don't at all think it's unreasonable for the city council to delegate that responsibility to an ad hoc committee to discuss the notion of a community oversight board, or to delegate the responsibility of oversight to a board that they appoint. And to suggest that a community oversight board is improper based on the idea that they are unelected bureaucrats while also celebrating the chief of police, who is also an unelected bureaucrat, is kind of hypocritical, I think, in my view. I believe that all city employees ought to be held to strict standards, especially those who are responsible for keeping the peace and who have the ability to take the lives of its citizens if they choose. And I won't repeat or belabor the points made earlier about the potential community oversight board working with the police and therefore negating the need for a police presence on the board. I would just like to instead point out the fact that the city council was elected, and if you look at the makeup, I think it's, in my view, a fairly more liberal than conservative city council, and I think it's important for the city council to be representative of the electorate. We, the people, chose the representatives that we wanted to have in our government, and the idea that having a political entity that is completely apolitical is just utter nonsense, frankly. Of course, there's going to be bias. Whether that bias is explicitly anti-police or not is kind of moot. The bias is going to exist one way or the other because of the nature of politics, and trying to avoid that is never going to accomplish anything. The city council was elected by people who believed that they would represent them, and I think it's important to keep that in mind when discussing any and all subjects, especially ones that have a particularly political energy behind them. I will yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Norton, for providing your views to the City Council. I'd like to move on now to the next person, which is Mark Homer. Mr. Homer, You have the floor. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Unmute. Oh yeah, there you are. Okay. Hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks for convening tonight to discuss this important issue in our community. My name is Mark Homer. I grew up here, went to school here. I got a couple degrees here. Lived here for many years. My family here. But I want to tell you that's not important. I heard some other people talk about that as if that's some kind of a legacy or an entitlement to having a bigger voice. But what we know about our community is that there are many vulnerable people, and whether you've lived here a month, whether you lived here a year, whether you own a house or you rent a house, it doesn't matter. The police are there to protect the most vulnerable among us. So I really am strongly in support of this ad hoc committee to have some oversight over our police force. And the more we have just ordinary citizens on that committee, rather than this official from that agency or this division, the more we have someone from the human rights group or the ACOP, we have someone from the women's rights group, we have a gun owner who loves his guns and supports the Second Amendment above and beyond what the Constitution says. All those people should have a voice, and we need not say that I've lived in Laramie, I've been here for 4 generations, I own a house and I pay taxes. No, it's people who are most vulnerable that need to have a voice, and that's why we're convening tonight. So again, I applaud the council for hearing this issue. This is a sign of the times, and wow, the kids in this community need a voice. It was great to see those people out protesting, raising their voices. Activists like Linda Devine and others who are exhausted, but they've fought the fight. They fought the fight. They've been out there battling for this. And Lord knows, we need oversight over our police and our city officials. We need more oversight than ever. We've seen how norms in our country have slid downhill over the last few years. We need oversight, and we need ordinary citizens involved in this process. And that's why we're here tonight, I believe. So thanks again for hearing me out and for listening to the people who are joining this call.
Thank you, Mr. Homer, and for taking time out of your evening to share your views with us. Council members, I don't see any further hands raised from our attendees. So at this time, I'm going to say it's going once for further public comment. Second call for further public comment before I close the public comment on this. Now going to close the public comment period for our special meeting. Council members, we've heard public comment. We've heard some information from the staff, a summary of the ad hoc group that the resolution forms. I'm going to ask council members to now indicate where they want the direction of this meeting to go. And I await your views. Council Member Schuster.
I'll be the first one to say it. This is our 5th Tuesday, and I don't want to offend anybody, but we're usually wrapping it up about now in our different ward meetings. And I felt this meeting was all for the public. And since the public is done, I feel the meeting should be done. Thank you.
Councilmember Schuster has shared his view. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my comments are actually similar to Councilor Schuster. We've heard a lot of public testimony tonight. I, for one, have some questions that I'd like to get answered before being prepared to vote on the resolution, namely around the composition, the points that are in it, as well as the timeline. And given that we've had so much public comment, and again, coming in as the council member that was not present for all of the meetings last summer, I would recommend that we bring this back at our next regular meeting to actually vote on it and give everybody just a minute to consider and think on what we've heard tonight. And I'd be prepared to make that motion at the appropriate time, but I don't want to cut anybody off from comment.
Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. There were members of the council that had not been on the council last year, of course, or the year before last. Council members, other views that you want to have heard right now? Councilmember Gabriel. Councilmember Gabriel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate City Manager Jordan and her explanation. I think the public had maybe a little bit different view after listening to all of the public comment here. I think that she really cleared things up. I learned quite a bit from her explanation on what this ad hoc committee is really, the formation and what it's really going to do for the next 12 months, potentially, if we agree to this. So, I'm ready to go either way. I just wanted to thank Janine for her comments and letting everybody in the public know what this ad hoc committee is really all about. And I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember Gabriel. Yeah, the written word only goes so far, and some context is always useful. Council members. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm fine with postponing this evening, and I'm ready to go for amendments if we want to hang out for a little while and work on this. Either way, I'm good. So just let me know. In terms of a postponement, I don't know. We've got a really full agenda next week, so that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And earlier you had mentioned that, but I wanted to have the meeting process unfold before we got to this point in the discussion. So I think it's an appropriate time to have that discussion now, and I appreciate your patience with that. I have some views, but I want to make sure other council members have time. Council Member Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly understand that in keeping with the fifth Tuesday idea and just hearing from the public, but I am concerned about the length of our April 6th meeting. And so, I would be favorable to sticking it out and hearing what Councilor Pierce has to offer, simply so even if we are going to postpone, so we at least know what we're talking about. If the rest of council maybe wants to postpone, I'm okay with that as well. I can understand that we do have two colleagues that are that were not on council through through 2020, so can understand that they might want to take a little more time.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. Council members, you haven't provided a view yet. This would be a good time. Councilmember Cumby.
I just want to say I think this has been a very important meeting. I appreciate the comments from the public, not only tonight in our meeting, but also the effort that has gone into writing and offering opinion. City Manager Jordan, I found your summary of the resolution to be extremely helpful. I was a follower of council last year as we were going through this. And so I was in the audience rather than on the council. So I do have quite a bit of familiarity with the process that has happened. And I know it's a fifth Tuesday, but I would be willing to entertain the amendments if that's how council wishes to proceed. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby. Other thoughts? Council members, this is what I want you to consider before I go to Councilmember Somerville, who I anticipate may be making a motion. This is what I'd like you to consider, and I don't think you'll find what I have to say unreasonable. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other about whether or not we postpone this item this evening. I agree with the Vice Mayor's assessment about the agenda for next week, and I'll share this with you as a member of the council and also as the mayor at this time. Whenever this item is moved, whatever future date we consider it, it will be the only item considered. Because if it's on an agenda with other items, it will take up the majority of the time. And Council Member O'Doherty spoke to this last time when we arranged this special meeting. And we will hear variations, I think, of the views of the members of the public who feel strongly about this for one side or the other. So I think we need to factor that in, because I think it would be inappropriate and unwise to try to place this on an agenda with a great deal of other work for the council, simply because it will invite an opportunity for public comment, which is appropriate and as it should, but it will, in my view, control the time and absorb the time for whatever meeting agenda that it's on. That's not an argument for not postponing it to a future meeting, but I would be reluctant to allow it to be on an agenda with any other items, because I don't think it will allow for careful consideration and public input for whatever other items might be on an agenda for the City Council. Input before I go to Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember Cumby.
Are you suggesting that we might schedule an additional meeting, for instance, on a Wednesday or something where this would be the only item and we would vote on it at that point in time?
Councilmember Cumby, to answer your question, I'm not making a specific suggestion about what the council decide to do. I am communicating to the council that I will be reluctant to put this on an agenda with any other item. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I might be a little bit misinformed about our intention here, but I sort of understood that was exactly what we were doing tonight, was taking time away, calling a special meeting to hear from the public and to cast our opinion on this resolution. So, you know, I can see the value in postponing, but I thought that was sort of what we were doing. I thought that's sort of how we ended up here. So I'm not sure where I missed something if I did, but that was sort of what I thought we were up to tonight. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Councilmember Harrington, I'm not in a position to correct you. I think we organized a meeting so that we would have adequate time to hear views primarily about this issue. In terms of our future actions after hearing those views or what the council's intentions were going forward, I don't think those were clear. So I don't believe that you missed anything. I think it's just an evolving topic in terms of where we go from here. Council members, before I move to Councilmember Somerville. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I make the motion, I have a question for the city manager or yourself on the April 13th work session. Do we know what's queued up for that day yet?
Mayor, City Council, I don't know specifically. I do believe we have a number of contracts coming forward just because it's that time of year. And I don't have any big items that I'm aware of at this point in time that would be lengthy policy discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, as city manager. So for that work session night, we don't have any large items queued up right now for work session topics. That's what I understood.
Councilmember Somerville. I'm going to go to the city clerk, and then I'll go back to you, council member, and back to you, city manager. City clerk.
Mr. Mayor and council, on April 13th, you currently have your capital budget starting.
Thank you, city clerk. I think that's worth noting. Councilmember Somerville, other questions for the city clerk or the city manager?
No, I think that sums it up.
City manager, did you want to, pardon me, Councilmember Somerville, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't need to. Thank you.
I apologize, Councilmember Somerville. Please go ahead.
That's okay. So I just wanted to check on the date for postponement, and it doesn't sound like April 13th would be appropriate for that motion. So, Mr. Mayor, I would move to postpone this item and set a special meeting for April 7th, which is a Wednesday night at 6 p.m.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilmember Schuster. Discussion. Councilmember Somerville, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my reasoning is kind of similar to what I explained, just in a little bit more depth. Going through what I have marked before the meeting and after listening to public comments, I probably have 7 or 8 amendments to this resolution. And I'd like some time to form those up and get those out to everybody for consideration rather than trying to do this ad hoc tonight. And again, I have some questions on the actual directives in the resolution. And I need to get a little bit more background, I think, from city staff on where those came from. And I'm happy to do that on my own again, since I wasn't here last summer, because in general, the resolution seems incredibly broad. So I would say overall, I have concerns about the committee size. I have concerns about the bullet points in terms of what we expect them to accomplish, as well as the timeline. And before I go hacking away at a resolution with amendments, I want to make sure I have all of my facts and understanding straight and can present that to the council in a coherent manner.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Doherty.
I oppose postponing this yet because I would like to hear Vice Mayor Pierce's amendments, because it gives us time to think about them, and we could maybe work through a few amendments and see what we think, and then postpone before we make a final vote, because we will have the same people commenting again and again. So, you know, we moved it to this week in order to have more time for comments, and we've had more comments, and that's great. But I think that that we could just be on a treadmill here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Doherty. And I would note that we began the meeting at 5 minutes after 6, and we're now approaching 5 minutes after 8. So I believe the special meeting was justified. Nothing in Robert's Rules of Order prevents any member of the council, vice mayor, or anyone else from previewing any amendments they might like to bring, provided they don't actually move those amendments. We can certainly hear about them if council members want to touch on any of those. Council members, further discussion? Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point. I do understand the issue with public comment and making sure that we're allowing that due diligence. But I would remind the council that public comment will be taken on every single amendment that we move. And they'll have to all be allowed to speak. So I don't know that we're going to get away from the time constraints in terms of how long this process will take to move this resolution forward, whether it's tonight or in a week or two or whatever that is.
City
And I'd
Manager.
be happy to preview my amendments, Mr. Mayor, if that's the way council wants to go.
You know what, Councilmember Somerville, I'm gonna retain the floor for you, but I want to just make sure that the city manager wasn't raising a hand for recognition a moment ago. Okay, she was not. Councilmember Somerville, that's up to you if you want to touch on those now. I'd ask you to consider that the vice mayor has mentioned previous in the meeting, and frankly, in order before you, that she had also had some amendments. So I don't know if we want to hear and see if there's some crossover. Councilmember Somerville, just a suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd be happy to let the vice mayor go first with her preview, and then I can tack mine on.
It might make sense to go that direction. Thank you, Councilmember Somerville. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you. We are talking about the postponement and not amendments, and we have a postponement on the floor and a second. So I think we vote on that, and then if that fails, then we can go forward with other topics. But I just thought I'd clarify that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The view of the chair is that these discussions are germane to the postponement, given that we're talking about time management. But the council can always overrule the chair's view on that. All right, no one seems eager to dive into the discussion of amendments, which I think speaks favorably towards the argument for postponement. Further comments? Further comments? Councilmember Somerville, I believe we are about to ask the city clerk to take a roll call vote on a motion to postpone this item until a special meeting on, what was the date again, Councilmember Somerville?
I believe April 7th.
April 7th. I will make this last comment before I ask the city clerk for the roll call, which is that we've heard frustration about this process. And I want to communicate that I don't think anyone is on the council is deaf to that. I would also say that I think there's an incredible amount of contention and controversy around anything related to this discussion. And it isn't becoming less, it's increasing. The council has received a petition from numerous residents of the city. We have received a number of emails from numerous residents of the city. And we, of course, are proceeding with this based on meetings and public comment that we received beginning in June, late June of early June. Councilmember O'Doherty's correct, early June of last year. So it's been a lengthy discussion. And it hasn't begun to become any less complicated in my view, nor do I think it will at any point. And I would ask for those members of the public that have communicated with us their views for or against to bear with your local elected officials as we try to navigate what is an extremely complicated and controversial topic as best as we can. And certainly encourage you to continue to reach out to us through email, phone calls, or whatever format you're most comfortable with. City Clerk, can we have a roll call vote on the motion to postpone?
Cumby.
Yes.
Gabriel.
Yes.
Harrington.
No.
O'Doherty.
No.
Schuster.
Yes.
Stalder.
No.
Somerville.
Yes.
Pierce.
Yes.
Weaver.
No.
That's 5 yeses and 4 noes, Your Honor.
And that motion carries. And that item has been postponed to the date indicated. Having no other items on the agenda, and having had time and a place on the agenda for non-agenda item related public comment previously in the meeting. We will now close this special meeting, but we will need a motion to do that, and I would call on Councilor Schuster.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye or indicate by raising your hand on the screen.
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.